I don't see any participants right now, but we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully people will at least view the recording. The materials for the webinar are here, the Simple Witch Game PowerPoint. Let me share my screen so you can see that. All right, so this URL, which I will put into the chat window, is where the slides are for the Simple Witch Game. So that's there in the chat window. And the Simple Witch Game is one that we've used to introduce middle school to high school kids to Scratch by having them create a simple game. So the slides, which I've shown here, walk through doing this. I will go in between the slides and showing it in Scratch. So this simple game will talk about event handling. You'll be responding to arrow keys to move the witch, simple sequential execution, loops, variables, conditionals, parallel execution, so doing two things at the same time, and message passing using broadcast and receive in Scratch, which is a way for different sprites to communicate. So we're going to make a game where the player controls a witch using arrow keys and has to catch a falling pumpkin, because it's October now, and this will be a good Halloween one. And if the witch misses the pumpkin and the pumpkin makes it all the way to the bottom of the screen, then the game will be over. So, of course, to start Scratch, usually click on the Scratch icon, and you can change it from being the cat that's originally shown by editing the preferences, the startup file. If you read the README in Scratch, you can find out how to fix that. So I'm going to get rid of the cat right away and delete it. So if I open up Scratch, there's the cat. I can delete it one of two ways. I can just right-click on it and delete it, typically, or I can use the scissors. So I can go up and click the scissors here, let's say delete, and then click on it and it'll delete. If you didn't want to delete it, you could always undo it by going to the Edit menu and clicking Undelete. And you should be able to right-click on it as well. I'm having trouble with that right now. But I can use the scissors to get rid of it. And then what we want to do, so we've gotten rid of the cat, is we want to add the witch. And at the bottom of that stage window that shows what's on your stage, there's a set of starred buttons, and one of them is a paintbrush where you can paint a sprite. One is a folder where you can pick a sprite from a file. That's what we're going to do. So this one right here, choose new sprite from file, the one that has a star and the folder looking icon. And if we go to Fantasy and open that, we'll see lots of fantasy creatures, and the witch is near the bottom. So witch 1 is what I'm going to grab. And you can resize sprites in Scratch. So that's how we added the witch. Went to the fantasy editor. You can use these arrows that go out will grow it, and arrows that go in will shrink it in Scratch to make her a little smaller, to make the game a little more interesting. So if we click on her with this arrows all going toward the middle, she'll shrink. And then we can always go back to, click away from this to go back to a cursor and drag her back down to the bottom of the stage area. So we can do that. Click the arrow, click on outside this. There used to be an arrow before 1.4. There isn't any longer, but if you just click away from those mouse controls, you can do it. We want to have a prettier background than this plain white background for the stage. So if we click on Stage and then Backgrounds and import one, we could add one. So click on the stage here to select the stage. And notice the blue highlight. So this one shows that the witches currently are what we're working with, and this blue highlight around here shows that the stage is what we're currently working with. So if we go to Backgrounds and Import, and we go to Outdoors, we can see this Night City. And there's Night City with something. I forget which one I said to use. Night City, just Night City. So I'll grab Night City. And so that looks a little more interesting for our game to have a nice background for it. So now we have a background that looks like a city, and we have a witch. And we want to control the witch using the arrow keys. So when we click the left arrow, the witch should move left. Click the right arrow, the witch should move right. And we call this event handling in computer science. It's a way to handle events like the mouse moving, mouse clicking, arrow keys being pressed. So that's all event handling. And the way we have to understand is that the Scratch stage has 0, 0 in the center, and it's 480 pixels wide, and it ranges from -240 to +240 in X then. And it is 360 pixels high, so it ranges from -180 at the bottom to +180 at the top. So if we want to move left, we're going to change the x value. We're going to decrease the current x value. If we want to move right, we're going to increase the current x value. So that's one of the things we have to know when we're trying to move the switch. So to program the switch, we want to make sure that she's selected and that the scripts tab is selected. So if we click back on the witch, we see that she's selected. She's called Sprite 1 up here. We can even change that to be witch so we know what she is. And then we click on the scripts tab in order to start programming her. So we're going to respond to the arrow keys. Those are control structures, orange category. So control structures when the space key is pressed. So we go click on the orange control category, drag out it when the space key is pressed and drop it here in the scripts area. And then change that space key to, say, left arrow. I forget what I said down here. We haven't said it to you yet. Click select right arrow here and then move 10 steps from motion. So we're going to say right arrow first. And then we select from motion. We want to move her 10 steps in a positive direction when you click on the right. Now if we want to change that 10 is a lot to move, we might want to just move by 5. So we just click on the number here, 10, and it's highlight, and then we can just type a new number and hit enter or return. So now when the right arrow key is pressed, she will move 5 steps. And one nice feature of Scratch is she won't leave the window completely, so we see the broom is still there. And notice that we could start executing this right away, and it's highlighted right away as we were doing it, so it's a good way of testing. If we want to do a similar sort of thing for the left arrow, so we're going to use the stamp feature up here in the mouse areas controls. So we used the scissors before and the grow or shrink sprite. Now we're going to use the stamp to duplicate. So we click at the top of the stack that we want to duplicate, drag it down, and now we'll change to left arrow and we'll make this a -5 steps rather than 5 steps. So now the arrow keys, we can go ahead and try them. The arrow keys will move her left or right. So that's the beginning of a game where she's supposed to move to catch the pumpkin. So next step is respond to the arrow keys. We did that. Now we want to add a pumpkin, and there isn't a pumpkin already sprite, so we can paint our own sprite. So in Scratch, it comes with some basic paint tools, which are here with the star with the paintbrush, Paint New Sprite. Click on that, and we get a bunch of controls. So we're going to draw the pumpkin. We'll use the circle tool to draw the pumpkin body. Use the eyedropper to pick an orange color, and we can use the line tool to make the eyes and the nose and things. So we'll do that. So use the circle tool and then use color. We'll use this orange color. So I'll draw my circle for my pumpkin. And then I'll switch to a black color use the line tool to make little triangular looking eyes. And I click and then drag and then release when I want to stop the line, and click and drag and release when I want to continue it. So here I have, so I'll make a face like that. You can add, if I want a green stem, I could do that to make a little rectangle stem so it looks like a pumpkin. When I finish my pumpkin, I just click on OK, and it adds it as a sprite, and again names it Sprite 1, and I can rename that to Pumpkin if I want. So I can keep track of what they really are. I have a witch and a pumpkin. And I can make this, of course, bigger or smaller, just like we did the witch, so I can make my pumpkins a bit smaller if I want, and drag it up to the top of the screen here. So now I have my witch and my pumpkin, and I want to make my pumpkin fall when we start the game. So making the pumpkin fall, usually we'll start the game when the green flag is clicked, is usually how things in Scratch will start. So we'll go ahead and drag that out of the orange control structure for the pumpkin. Remember, we're working with the pumpkin right now, so when the green flag is clicked for the pumpkin, what will we do? Well, we want it to be moving. So when we start the game, though, Scratch doesn't automatically reset to a given position, so you should go ahead and make sure that you're setting up your game so each time somebody hits the green flag, it starts where you want it to start. So we'll drag out of motion the go to X and Y, and what it's going to use is its current position. In fact, if I move the pumpkin around, I might get a different position for it, but that's the current position. It was at X was 5 and Y was 139. Remember, it goes up to 180, so that makes sense. I can always, of course, type in another value there. But by dragging it there, I make sure it starts where I want it to start. So this is going to be sequential execution, where one command is executed before another. So when the green flag is clicked, then the pumpkin will go to that X and Y location. And we want the pumpkin to continue to move down unless the witch catches it. Now we could pull out lots of blocks one after another saying change Y by -1, which would make it fall. But we'd rather not do that. That would be very tedious, and we'd have to check each time we change Y to see if we hit anything yet. So a better way to do that is a loop or iteration. So in Scratch, we can use a forever loop, which doesn't really mean forever. It means keep executing these until the script is stopped or we stop Scratch. That's also a control structure here in the forever. The orange control structure, there's a forever. So we'll say forever, change Y by -1, which will make it fall. So that's motion category, change Y by, and we'll change from 10 here to -1. So it'll go down in Y. So we can just try it. When I hit the green flag, the pumpkin starts to fall, and I can move the witch. And of course, I don't have any code right now that checks to see if she caught it, so it's just going to fall to the bottom and stop. So we don't have any code yet to know if she caught the pumpkin. So if the pumpkin touches the witch, then we want to catch it. So we want to keep track of how many pumpkins we've caught with a score, and we'll increment the score each time we catch a pumpkin. So we're going to do that. So we need to add a score, and a score is a variable. It's something, scores can change over time. You would hope so in a game that your score would go up, or you wouldn't be very good at playing the game. And that means that the value can vary, and those are called variables in computer science, things that have values that can vary. So we're going to make a new variable. We're going to call it score. So that could be on all sprites or the sprite only. It doesn't really matter at this point, so we'll say for all sprites. And one of the things we're going to want to do is when you start the game up, you're going to want to set the score to 0. So we'll start off with a score of 0. And then every time she catches the pumpkin, we will increment the score, change the score by 1. So we'll add to the score. And notice that in Scratch, it automatically added a bunch of tiles now for score, or blocks. And it shows the score as 0 right away. And I can move this around. I can drag it to a different location if I want, or it was fine where it was. So I can leave it there. If you didn't want that to show, you can just uncheck it here on the very left and the tile next to it that shows it's showing or not. So it's very handy for checking to see what values are, and then you can turn it off later. So we're using a variable for score, and this shows what we just did. We went to the variables category and we created a variable called score, and we've added set score to 0 so that when you start the game over again, it'll be at 0. So now we want to catch the score if and only if the witch has actually caught the pumpkin. We call that a conditional, so we conditionally execute code based on if the condition is true. Usually the condition is a Boolean expression, something that's true or false. So did we catch the pumpkin? So we'll say inside the forever, we'll check if we're touching the sprite 1, which would be the witch here. So we'll pull out of control structure an if, and put this inside under the change. So if something is touching, so if we're touching the witch, so if the pumpkin is touching the witch, then we want to increment the score. So under variables, we're going to change the score by 1. Now we can try that, see what we get.